As we embark on a journey through the annals of ancient history, take a moment to find a comfortable place to rest. Close your eyes and let your consciousness drift back to the era of the Roman Empire, a civilization renowned for its remarkable advancements, expansive territories, and intriguing legal systems. Our exploration begins in the heart of this formidable empire, Rome. In the early days of the Roman Empire, the legal system was heavily influenced by the concept of paterfamilias, or the male head of the family who held significant power, including the authority to life and death over his family members. This authority extended beyond the confines of the family, permeating the public sphere as well. The Roman law, as we will discover, was a reflection of the society's hierarchical and power-driven structures, with punishments often mirroring the severity of the offenses. One such severe punishment was pool, translated as the punishment of the sack. This punishment was reserved for the most heinous crime in Roman society, known as parricide, which involved the act of killing a parent or close relative. The offender was sewn into a leather sack, often containing animals such as a dog, rooster, viper, and monkey, and then thrown into a river or the sea. The sack symbolized the domestic sphere where the crime occurred, while the animals represented specific elements of Roman cosmology and their connection to the crime committed. This bizarre punishment served not only as a powerful symbol, but also as a public spectacle. The Romans believed that this public display of punishment acted as a deterrent, discouraging the population from committing similar crimes. The offender was not merely executed, they were effectively erased from society. Their death served as a theatrical reminder of the consequences of defying Rome's laws and moral standards. Another peculiar punishment involved the Roman army. If a legion exhibited cowardice or misconduct, they faced the severe punishment of decimation. This term originates from the Latin word decimatio, meaning the removal of a tenth. It involved a cruel and unusual form of punishment. The legion was divided into groups of 10, and each group would draw lots. The unfortunate soldier who drew the short straw would be beaten or stoned to death by his comrades. This brutal punishment served to reinforce discipline, unity, and loyalty within the military ranks, reminding each soldier of their duty to Rome and their comrades. In contrast to these harsh punishments, the Romans also employed psychological tactics to enforce their laws. One such strategy was the infamia, a form of social ostracism. Individuals convicted of certain crimes were branded as infames and stripped of certain legal and social rights. They were usually barred from holding public office, giving public performances, and even appearing in court. This punishment was particularly effective because it targeted the individual's social status, an important aspect of Roman society. As we delve deeper into the complexities of Roman law and its eccentricities, we encounter the noxi. These were criminals sentenced to the most severe punishment, death by the beasts in the gladiatorial games. This punishment was not merely a death sentence, it was a form of entertainment for the masses. The noxi were often poorly armed, if at all, and sent into the arena to face ferocious beasts. Their death was not just a punishment, but a public spectacle. Their fear and agony served as amusement for the bloodthirsty spectators. These unusual punishments, while seemingly harsh and brutal to us, were an integral part of the Roman legal system. They reflected the Romans' understanding of justice, punishment, and social order. Despite their severity, these punishments were often perceived as fair and just, a testament to the Romans' belief in the power and necessity of the law. As we conclude this section of our exploration into ancient Roman punishments, let your mind wander away from the imposing structures of the Colosseum and the grandeur of the Roman courts. Instead, imagine yourself strolling through the quieter streets of Rome, where the echoes of these bygone punishments have long faded. Let the soothing rhythm of Roman life lull you into a peaceful slumber. As we prepare to delve deeper into Rome's rich and complex history in the sections to come, remember that the stories of the past can serve as a comforting lullaby for the present, a gentle reminder of the enduring nature of human civilization. Rest now, and let the tales of ancient Rome guide you into a tranquil and restful night. In the next section, we will continue our exploration into Rome's most bizarre punishments, delving into the intricacies of their legal system. For now, however, let the echoes of the Roman Empire lull you into a peaceful rest as we bid Rome and its peculiar laws a temporary farewell. As we delve deeper into the annals of Roman history, we encounter some truly fascinating aspects of their judicial system, including their unique approach to punishment. The Romans were known for their strict adherence to the law and the severity of their penalties, which were often designed not only to punish but also to deter potential wrongdoers. Let's explore some of the more unusual punishments that were prevalent in ancient Rome. One such bizarre punishment was known as the peina cool. This punishment was reserved for individuals found guilty of parricide, which is the killing of a parent. It was considered one of the most heinous crimes in Roman society, and thus was met with a particularly gruesome penalty. The convicted person was first scourged or whipped, then sewn into a leather sack with a collection of live animals, typically a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. The sack was then thrown into a river or the sea. The symbolism behind this unusual punishment was profound and darkly poetic. The variety of animals represented the diversity of the Roman Empire, while the sack symbolized the womb from which the parasite had emerged only to betray it. Another unusual punishment was the damnatio bestas, or condemnation to beasts. This punishment was often meted out to slaves, criminals, and Christians who were seen as threats to the pagan state. These individuals were thrown to wild beasts during public games in the Colosseum, a spectacle intended to demonstrate the empire's might and the fate of those who dared to oppose it. The condemned were often left defenseless, adding to the horror of the spectacle. This brutal and terrifying form of public execution was designed to entertain the masses while reinforcing the indomitable power of the Roman state. Moving on, we encounter the decimation, a punishment reserved for soldiers who showed cowardice or insubordination. The word decimation derives from the Latin decimatio, meaning removal of a tenth. Soldiers were divided into groups of 10, and each group drew lots. The unlucky soldier who drew the short straw was then beaten or stoned to death by his comrades. This punishment served two purposes. It instilled fear in the ranks and reinforced the importance of camaraderie and loyalty to the Roman army. Another peculiar form of punishment was the furca. A convicted person was forced to carry a forked piece of wood, known as a furca, on their shoulders. They were then paraded around the town while being beaten. The humiliation was a significant part of the punishment, as carrying the furca was a public admission of guilt. It was a simple yet effective deterrent, shaming the guilty person in front of their community. In addition to these physical punishments, the Romans also implemented several psychological punishments. One such punishment was infamia, or disgrace. This form of public humiliation stripped the guilty person of their social status and privileges. It was particularly harsh in a society that placed great importance on honor and reputation. The Romans also practiced interdict aequae ad ignis, or banishment by water and fire. This involved the exile of an individual from Roman territory, forbidding them to use fire or water, which symbolized basic necessities of life. It was essentially social ostracism, a severe punishment in a society valuing community and cohesion. The Romans also practiced servitus puen, or slave of the penalty, involving the enslavement of a person for a crime. This person was stripped of rights and forced to work without pay, often reserved for debtors unable to repay loans. Finally, the vallum punished soldiers who deserted their posts. They were forced to spend a night outside the camp, unprotected from dangers. This punishment aimed to instill fear and discipline in the Roman army. These bizarre punishments reveal the complex legal and social structures of ancient Rome. They reflect the Romans' emphasis on discipline, honor, and social order, as well as their penchant for theatricality and spectacle. As we explore Roman history, it becomes evident that their approach to justice was multifaceted and intricate, mirroring the empire itself. We find ourselves surrounded by the echoes of a long-gone civilization, each stone whispering tales of triumph and tribulation. This section of our journey focuses on a unique and bizarre aspect of Roman life, the practice of punitive peina, or the penalty of the sack. The peina coulae, reserved for the most heinous crime considered by the Romans, was a punishment as unsettling as the crime itself. Parricide, the act of killing one's own parent or a close relative, was so unthinkable that the Romans devised a punishment equally unsettling in response. The condemned was sewn into a sack, along with a collection of animals, most commonly the Tiber River in Rome. The animals included a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, each carrying its own symbolic significance in this grim tableau. The dog, the guardian of the household and the embodiment of loyalty, represented the betrayal of these virtues by the perpetrator. The rooster, a bird that heralds the dawn, symbolized the disruption of natural order, as the crime of parricide was seen to go against the law of nature itself. The viper, a poisonous snake, served to represent the venomous act of treachery that parricide was considered to be. Finally, the monkey, a creature often associated with mimicry and mockery in Roman culture, was likely included as a symbol of the unnatural, grotesque inversion of familial relationships that the crime represented. The condemned, sewn into this ghastly menagerie, was then cast into the river, symbolizing their removal from society and their descent into the underworld, a journey from which there was no return. This was not merely a physical punishment, but a spiritual one too, designed to instill fear and enforce order. From our modern perspective, the peine coulée might appear excessively brutal and macabre, a reflection of a time when justice was more about retribution than rehabilitation. However, for the Romans, it was a fitting response to a crime they found unimaginably cruel. It's important to note that while the peine coulée was a legally sanctioned punishment, it was not frequently used. Parricide was considered such a serious crime that the Romans believed it to be relatively rare. The threat of this punishment, however, served its purpose as a formidable deterrent. The symbolism in the poena held a complex meaning, offering insights into the Roman psyche and their perception of crime and punishment. Each animal and action taken was not chosen lightly. They carried profound cultural and societal significance. This punishment was not merely intended to remove the criminal from society, but also to convey a powerful message to those left behind. As we delve deeper into the annals of Roman history, we will uncover more such tales of how the Romans dealt with transgressions against their societal norms. Each story contributes to the rich tapestry of their civilization, a civilization that has left an indelible mark on the world in countless ways. While the echoes of the Roman Empire have faded, their stories and practices continue to captivate us, providing a mirror into a time that is both different and strangely familiar to our own. Rest now, knowing that you have embarked on a journey back in time, walked the ancient streets of Rome, and discovered a piece of history that few have dared to explore. As we continue our journey into the realm of ancient Rome, we are drawn to its renowned grand constructions, diverse societal norms, and peculiar methods of justice. Despite their advanced administrative systems, the Romans had a penchant for bizarre punishments that often served as a form of public entertainment. Let us delve deeper into one such example, the peine coulée, a punishment that was particularly strange and terrifying. The peine coulée, or punishment of the sack, was reserved for the most heinous crime considered by the Romans, parricide, the act of killing one's own parents or close relatives. This alarming crime was so unthinkable to the Romans that they devised an equally terrifying punishment to deter potential offenders. The sentenced criminal was placed inside a large leather sack, but they were not alone. The Romans, in their unique approach to punishment, introduced a collection of live animals to the sack, often including a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. This unusual assortment held deep symbolic significance, representing various aspects of the chaos and disorder that the crime of parricide brought to Roman society. Once the condemned was securely fastened to the sack with the animals, it was thrown into a body of water, typically the Tiber River. The criminal faced an inescapable fate at the river's bottom, unable to escape the sack, the biting and scratching animals, or the suffocating weight of the water. This punishment denied the offender a proper burial, a fate considered even worse than death itself in Roman culture, where ancestral veneration held utmost importance. The peine coulée, as this bizarre punishment was known, sent shivers down the spine, but also provided a vivid portrayal of Roman civilization's moral and societal values. The Romans believed in public displays of punishments as a deterrent against potential criminals. The spectacle of the peine coulée served as a stark reminder of the consequences of disrupting societal norms. Despite its severity, the peine coulée was not an often employed punishment. Its infrequent use may have been due to the perceived gravity of the crime it was intended to punish. Parricide was regarded as such a grave offense that the Romans believed only the most disturbed individuals could commit such acts. Interestingly, the Powell was not the original punishment for parricide in Rome. Initially, offenders were simply exiled. However, as Roman society evolved and its moral code became stricter, the punishment for parricide became increasingly severe, ultimately leading to the creation of the pena clare. While this punishment was undoubtedly harsh, it is essential to remember that it was a product of its time and culture. Ancient Rome was a civilization that placed immense value on honor, family, and respect for societal order above all else. The pena clare, a stark reflection of societal values, served as a brutal reminder of the consequences of defying norms. As we leave behind the chilling tale of the pena clare, we venture deeper into the intricate tapestry of Roman history, a narrative woven with threads of triumph, disaster, compassion, and cruelty. The ancient Rome, with its grand Colosseum, bustling marketplaces, stringent moral code, and often macabre sense of justice, continues to captivate us, drawing us into its intricate web of stories. As your eyelids grow heavy and your mind drifts into the realm of a bygone civilization, let the echoes of ancient Rome lull you into a peaceful slumber. Instead of dwelling on the harshness of their justice, let us instead appreciate their contributions to society, their architectural marvels, their literary achievements, and their philosophical insights. As we conclude this chapter, we prepare to embark on a further exploration, delving deeper into the annals of history, guided by the gentle whispers of the past. Let the soothing rhythm of these stories transport you to a world of dreams, leaving behind the weight of the present, if only for a fleeting moment. Sleep well and dream of a time long past, yet ever present in the echoes of our shared human history. We have traversed the early history of Rome and delved into the unique forms of penal systems that emerged during that era. Now let us venture a little further into the peculiarities of ancient Rome's punishments. Among the most bizarre forms of punishment was damnatio ad bestes, a sentence that entailed being thrown to the beasts. This capital punishment involved placing criminals in an arena where they faced wild animals such as lions or bears. The mere mention of this punishment conjures images of the renowned Roman Colosseum, a grand structure that hosted these brutal spectacles. The condemned were left defenseless, their fate sealed in the jaws or claws of these ferocious creatures. The Romans regarded this as a form of entertainment, an unsettling reflection of the societal norms of their time. Another unusual punishment, known as decimation, was a military punishment used for soldiers who displayed cowardice or mutiny. Derived from the Latin word decimatio, meaning the removal of a tenth, decimation involved dividing a military unit into groups of 10. Each group would then draw lots to determine which soldier would be executed. The unlucky soldier would be clubbed or stoned to death by his comrades. The surviving soldiers would be forced to live outside the camp and subsist on barley instead of wheat. This punishment was both psychological and physical, instilling fear and maintaining discipline within the ranks. For those who committed patricide, the murder of their father, the punishment was known as par cool. Considered an act so heinous that a simple execution was insufficient, the condemned would be sewn into a leather sack with various animals, typically a dog, a viper, and a monkey. The sack would then be thrown into a river or the sea, ensuring a slow and terrifying death. This punishment reflected society's deep respect for the patriarchal figure and the severity of the crime committed against it. Roman society also had a unique form of punishment and humiliation called infamia. Unlike physical punishment, infamia was a social one. Individuals who committed certain crimes were stripped of their social standing and rights, including the right to vote, hold public office, and make legal contracts. They were also prohibited from appearing in public without a distinctive mark or dress that signified their lowered status. This punishment was particularly harsh in a society that placed a high premium on honor and social standing. One of the more exotic forms of punishment, reserved primarily for those who committed treason, was being forced to commit suicide. This was often the fate of prominent individuals who held high positions in society. Perhaps the most famous case is that of the philosopher Seneca, who was accused of conspiracy against Emperor Nero. Seneca was ordered to end his own life, doing so by slitting his veins and poisoning himself. This form of punishment allowed the guilty party to die with some semblance of honor rather than being publicly executed. Punishments for less serious crimes were also severe. For instance, thieves were often sentenced to work in the mines, a grueling and dangerous job. Those who committed fraud were usually sentenced to hard labor, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Even petty crimes were met with severe punishments. Vandalism, for example, could result in the offender's hand being cut off. It's clear that the ancient Romans had a wide range of punishments for those who deviated from the norm. These punishments were designed not only to deter individuals from committing crimes, but also to maintain the strict social order that was crucial to the functioning of Roman society. As we continue our exploration of ancient Rome's most bizarre punishments, we can observe how these punishments reflect the values and beliefs of the society that implemented them. They serve as a stark reminder of the harsh and often brutal nature of life in ancient Rome. As we move into the next section of our journey, we'll explore some of the lesser-known but equally peculiar punishments of this ancient civilization. So, as your eyes grow heavy and your mind starts to wander, let us take you further down the winding path of Rome's history, where we'll uncover more of this fascinating yet brutal aspect of the Roman justice system. As we delve deeper into the intriguing world of ancient Rome, we now turn our attention to a punishment that might seem oddly familiar, yet its implementation was distinctly Roman in character. This was the punishment of damnatio a bestas, or condemnation to beasts. This form of execution, famously used as a spectacle, was often part of the grand and bloody gladiatorial games. The Romans, known for their elaborate public spectacles, employed this punishment as entertainment. In these events, condemned individuals were thrown into a large arena filled with wild beasts, primarily imported from Africa. Lions, tigers, bears, and even elephants were used to maul and kill the convicted. The crowd gathered in the massive Colosseum or other amphitheaters eagerly witnessed the chilling spectacle of man versus beast. The public nature of these events served a dual purpose. It provided twisted amusement for the masses and acted as a stark warning to those who might consider breaking the law. This punishment was reserved for the lowest of the low in Roman society, including slaves, prisoners of war, and criminals. However, even high-ranking officials and members of the nobility could find themselves in the arena if they fell out of favor with the emperor. For instance, the senator and historian Publius Cornelius Tacitus was reputedly sentenced to damnatio ad bestias by Emperor Domitian. However, the historical accuracy of this account is disputed, with some suggesting it might have been a political exaggeration. The implementation of this punishment was not always random. Sometimes the types of animals used were deliberately chosen to match the crime. For example, an arsonist could be sentenced to face a fiery salamander, a symbol of fire in ancient Roman mythology. Similarly, a thief might be thrown to a pack of wolves, symbolic of their predatory and deceitful nature. This added a layer of poetic justice to the punishment, transforming it into a morality play. However, not all who were condemned to the beasts perished in the arena. Some individuals managed to survive and even secure their freedom through this cruel form of entertainment. These individuals, known as bestiari, were often regarded as heroes by the Roman public. Their stories were retold and retold, adding to the allure of the games. While this form of punishment may seem barbaric to us now, it was an integral part of Roman society. It reflected their attitudes towards crime and punishment, as well as their love for spectacle and drama. The Romans were not alone in this regard. Many ancient civilizations used public executions as a form of entertainment and control, but few did so with the same flair and grandeur as the Romans. In the next section, we will explore another bizarre Roman punishment reserved for those who committed the most heinous crimes. But for now, let the image of the Roman Colosseum, filled with the roar of beasts and the cheers of the crowd, lull you into a peaceful slumber. As you drift off, consider the intriguing dichotomy of an ancient society that could create such magnificent architectural feats and works of art, yet also reveled in such brutal public spectacles. The ancient Romans continue to captivate us, not just for their achievements, but also for their contradictions. A civilization of such splendor and savagery all at once continues to captivate our imaginations, even as we drift into the realm of dreams. As we delve deeper into Roman history, we discover a wealth of information about how the ancient Romans dealt with crime and punishment. One of the most intriguing aspects of their judicial system was their penchant for bizarre and unusual punishments. As we continue our journey into this fascinating world, let us focus on the mos maiorum, the unwritten code from which the ancient Romans derived their social norms. These norms often determined the severity and nature of the punishments meted out to offenders. One of the most bizarre punishments was the poacule, or the penalty of the sack. This punishment, reserved for those guilty of parricide, the act of killing one's parents or close relatives, involved sewing the offender into a leather sack with various animals, often a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, and then throwing them into a body of water. This bizarre and gruesome punishment served as a visceral demonstration of the Romans' deep-seated belief in retributive justice and the sanctity of the family unit. The Romans also practiced decimation, a military punishment used during the Republic and early Empire. This disciplinary measure targeted armies or large groups guilty of crimes like mutiny or desertion. A cohort, typically comprising around 480 soldiers, would be divided into groups of 10. Each group would draw lots, and the soldier with the shortest draw would be executed by his comrades. This brutal punishment emphasized the Romans' high regard for loyalty, obedience, and duty to the state. Slavery was another form of punishment in ancient Rome. Slaves found guilty of crimes faced punishments ranging from torture to execution. Additionally, free citizens could also be sentenced to slavery known as servitude. This punishment was particularly severe as it stripped individuals of their social status and personal rights, effectively reducing them to property. Beyond these brutal physical punishments, the Romans employed psychological forms of punishment as well. One such method was infamia, a form of public humiliation. Those sentenced to infamia were essentially outcasts from society, stripped of their public rights, and often their property was confiscated. They were subjected to public scorn and ridicule, a punishment that was perhaps more damaging in a society that highly valued honor and reputation. Another unusual punishment was damnatio memoriale, or condemnation of memory. This punishment was typically reserved for disgraced politicians or those who had committed treason. It involved erasing the person's name from all public records and monuments, effectively erasing them from history. This was a particularly severe punishment in a society that valued legacy and remembrance. The Romans also employed a punishment known as interdict aqua ad igni, which meant being banned from water and fire. This was essentially a form of exile, where the convicted person was prohibited from being within a certain distance of the city's fire or water sources. Consequently, they were banished from the city and forced to live in the wilderness. While many of these punishments may seem harsh, and indeed they were, it's crucial to remember that they were part of a broader system of social control and deterrence. The Romans believed that the severity of their punishments acted as a deterrent against crime and social disorder, a belief that has persisted in many modern penal systems. As we move beyond the darker aspects of Roman justice, it's important to recognize that these punishments, as brutal as they may appear, were a reflection of the values and beliefs of the society that created them. In the next section, we'll delve deeper into the more peculiar aspects of Roman life, shedding light on the customs and practices that have shaped one of history's most influential civilizations. As your eyelids grow heavy and your mind drifts off to the rhythmic cadence of Roman history, may you find solace in the knowledge that sleep is just a breath away. So, let's embark on a journey into the heart of the ancient world and uncover more of its captivating, albeit sometimes unsettling truths. As we continue our exploration of the labyrinthine punishments of ancient Rome, we find ourselves amidst the Roman army. While the general populace had its own unique set of punishments, the Roman army was not to be outdone. Discipline within the ranks was strict, and punishments for misdeeds were severe. One such punishment in the Roman army was decimation. Decimation, a brutal punishment in the Roman military, was not to be confused with the modern usage of the word, which implies a significant reduction in numbers. In the Roman context, decimation had a very specific and severe meaning. If a military unit was found guilty of heinous crimes, such as mutiny or desertion, they would be subjected to decimation. The soldiers were divided into groups of 10, and each group would draw lots. The unlucky soldier who drew the shortest lot would be clubbed or stoned to death by the remaining 9. The purpose of this horrific punishment was not only to punish the guilty, but also to instill a profound sense of fear and obedience among the ranks. While decimation was undoubtedly brutal, it was not the only form of punishment employed by the Roman military. Another method used to maintain discipline was the furium. This punishment was meted out for crimes such as stealing, lying, or failing to stand guard properly. The guilty soldier would be beaten to death by his fellow soldiers using clubs. Although similar to decimation, the furium lacked the element of chance. Moving away from the military, let us delve into the broader society of ancient Rome. One of the most peculiar punishments employed by the Romans was the peina coel. This punishment was reserved for individuals guilty of parricide, the act of killing a parent or close relative. The Romans considered this an unthinkable crime, and the punishment was designed to match the severity of the act. The condemned person would be sewn into a leather sack, along with a variety of animals, typically a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster. Each of these creatures held symbolic significance, representing different negative traits. The snake symbolized evil, the dog represented greed, the monkey symbolized deceit, and the rooster, often associated with the underworld, represented darkness and death. The sack was then thrown into a river or the sea, leaving the condemned to a dreadful demise. The peina coel, a form of public spectacle, served as a stark reminder of the severe consequences of heinous acts. It was a visual demonstration of the harsh punishments awaiting those who dared to commit unthinkable crimes. In contrast to the spectacle of the peina coel, the Romans employed discreet punishments aimed at shaming the guilty rather than causing physical harm. One such punishment was infamia, a legal and social penalty. A person found guilty of certain crimes would be marked as infamous, resulting in a loss of rights and social standing. They could no longer vote, serve in the military, or hold public office. Additionally, they were excluded from social events, effectively turning them into social pariahs. In some cases, infamia was combined with branding, where a mark was burned onto the forehead, signifying the crime for all to see. This punishment was not only physical, but also social, as the branded individual would forever be marked as a criminal. While the punishments discussed so far have been predominantly physical, ancient Rome also employed psychological punishments. One such punishment was damnatio memorialia, the condemnation of memory. This punishment was reserved for individuals who had brought disgrace upon themselves and the empire, such as disgraced politicians or emperors. Their statues were destroyed, their names erased from public inscriptions, and all memory of them was officially suppressed. In essence, they were erased from history, a fate considered worse than death for many Romans who placed great importance on legacy and memory. This punishment served not only as a form of retribution, but also as a deterrent to others from following in their footsteps. As we delve deeper into the annals of Rome's past, we uncover a fascinating array of punishments, each more bizarre and intriguing than the last. These punishments, though brutal and often gruesome, offer a glimpse into the Roman mindset, their social structures, and their notions of justice. While it may be challenging for us to comprehend these practices, they were integral to Roman society, reflecting their complex and often harsh history. As we drift off to sleep, let us ponder these peculiar and intriguing punishments, marveling at the peculiarities of ancient Rome. Our exploration of the peculiar and often shocking punishments of ancient Rome concludes with the notorious punishment known as damnatio ad bestas. This Latin term, meaning condemnation to beasts, was a method of execution where the condemned were killed by wild animals, often as part of a spectacle in the Colosseum or other arenas. The concept of damnatio ad bestias originated in 200 BC when Rome was still a republic. Prisoners of war, slaves and criminals were frequently subjected to this spectacle, entertaining the masses. However, the punishment extended beyond physical torment. It involved humiliation, stripping away one's humanity, and publicly displaying their demise. As we settle into our pillows, let us envision the Roman Colosseum. Imagine the deafening roar of the crowd, the scent of dust and sweat in the air, and the palpable fear gripping those about to be thrown to the beasts. It was a spectacle that was both terrifying and captivating, a testament to Rome's power and cruelty. The animals used in these gruesome spectacles varied. Lions, leopards, bears, and wild boars were common, but the Romans also imported exotic creatures like elephants and hippopotamuses to enhance the novelty and excitement of the proceedings. The condemned were sometimes armed, but more often than not, they were defenseless, their fate sealed. Interestingly, these spectacles held religious significance as well. They were often held during religious festivals and considered offerings to the gods. The Romans believed that the death of the condemned would appease the gods and ensure Rome's prosperity. This stark reminder of ancient societies and our progress in understanding justice and human rights is profound. The practice of damnatio ad bestas persisted well into the Roman Empire, reaching its zenith during Emperor Trajan's reign in the 2nd century AD. Trajan was known for his extravagant spectacles, and it's said that he had 11,000 animals and 10,000 gladiators killed during his triumph in Dia. However, as the Roman Empire declined, so did the practice of damnatio ad vestas. The rise of Christianity and changing societal attitudes eventually led to its demise. The last known instances occurred in the 6th century AD during Emperor Anastasius's reign. As we conclude our first block, take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. The punishments of ancient Rome were gruesome and shocking, a stark contrast to the justice systems we have today. Their harshness serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of compassion, fairness, and human rights. Let the echoes of history wash over you, filling you with knowledge and understanding. Allow these stories from the past to guide you into a peaceful slumber as we prepare to explore more intriguing tales of history. In our next block, we'll continue our journey through time, delving deeper into the annals of history and carrying us on a wave of knowledge and discovery towards the serene shores of sleep. In our final segment, we extensively discussed the structure and organization of Roman law, exploring its complexities and nuances. As we explore the intricate world of Roman jurisprudence, we now turn our attention to the peculiar and unusual aspects of Roman punishment. While Roman law maintained a facade of justice and fairness, it was not above resorting to extraordinary and arguably cruel methods for certain crimes. One such peculiar punishment was known as damnatio ad bestas, which translates to condemnation to beasts. This punishment was reserved for the most heinous crimes in Roman society, such as treason and murder. The condemned individual was thrown into a pit or arena with ferocious animals, often lions or bears, and left to the mercy of these beasts. This was not a swift and painless death, but a prolonged spectacle designed to entertain the masses. The Romans, known for their love of spectacle and entertainment, transformed this gruesome punishment into a form of public amusement. Imagine the grandeur and scale of the Colosseum, filled to the brim with eager spectators eagerly awaiting the games to commence. The air would have been thick with anticipation and excitement. Then, the unfortunate condemned, stripped of their dignity and humanity, would be thrust into the arena. The crowd would fall silent in anticipation before erupting into cheers and jeers as the beasts were released. It was a spectacle of horror and cruelty. Yet, it was deemed a fitting punishment for those who had committed the most egregious crimes. Another bizarre punishment in ancient Rome was the act of poenaculae. This punishment was reserved for individuals who committed patricide, the act of killing one's own father. The Romans regarded this crime as one of the most unnatural and heinous acts a person could commit. The punishment for such a crime was fittingly unusual. The convicted individual was sewn into a leather sack along with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and an ape. The sack was then thrown into a river, resulting in the drowning of the criminal and the animals. The rationale behind this peculiar punishment remains somewhat unclear, but some historians suggest that the inclusion of animals held symbolic significance, each representing a distinct aspect of the heinous crime. In stark contrast to these brutal forms of punishment, Roman law also had a system of fines and penalties for lesser offenses. For instance, theft was typically punished with a fine, the amount of which was determined by the value of the stolen property. If the thief failed to pay the fine, they could be sold into slavery to settle the debt. Roman law was also unique in its approach to corporal punishment. Unlike many other ancient societies, The Romans did not extensively employ physical punishment, such as flogging or mutilation. Instead, they reserved these punishments as a last resort for the most severe crimes. The Roman legal system was, in many ways, a reflection of Roman society itself, characterized by its structured and orderly nature, yet not devoid of its dark and eccentric elements. As we continue our exploration of ancient Roman law and punishment, we will delve deeper into the mindset and beliefs of the Roman people and how these influenced their judicial system. How did the Romans justify such cruel and unusual punishments? And what does this reveal about their society and culture? As we venture further into this intriguing topic, let us take a moment to reflect on how far we have come as a society and how our understanding of justice has evolved over the centuries. Leaving behind the spectacle of the Colosseum and the peculiar ritual of the Panel, we step into the world of Roman law, where its quirks and peculiarities await us. As we delve deeper into this captivating period of history, let your mind wander through the corridors of time and let the echoes of the past lull you into a peaceful slumber. In the second section of our exploration into the peculiarities of ancient Roman punishments, we will explore the world of the amphitheater. This grand stage, a setting for numerous public spectacles in Roman society, was also the venue for public executions, often interwoven into theatrical performances. These public spectacles of punishment served as both entertainment for the masses and a stark reminder of the Roman state's power and authority. One such punishment was the damnatio ad bestes, or condemnation to beasts. This capital punishment involved individuals, often slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals, facing wild beasts like lions or bears in the amphitheater. Unarmed and defenseless, these individuals were not expected to survive. The spectacle was less about a fair fight and more about demonstrating Roman might, with the unfortunate individuals serving as a warning to those who dared to defy Rome's supremacy. However, the Romans also employed a more creative approach to this punishment. Instead of simply feeding the condemned to the beasts, they often incorporated executions into elaborate mythological plays. The condemned would assume the role of a character who, in the myth, was killed by a beast. For instance, an individual might be dressed as Orpheus, doomed to be torn apart by the Maenads, or as Action, destined to be devoured by his own hunting dogs. The Romans would then release the appropriate animals into the arena, and the tragic myth would unfold in reality. The crowd would watch enthralled as the narrative blurred the lines between theater, reality, and punishment. Another bizarre form of punishment was the pokul, or punishment of the sack. This penalty was reserved for parasites, those who killed their parents or other close family members. In this punishment, the criminal was sewn into a leather sack with various live animals, typically a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. The sack was then thrown into the sea or a river. The symbolism of this punishment was deeply ingrained in Roman culture. The diverse array of animals depicted symbolized the chaos and disorder caused by the crime of parasitism to the Roman societal and familial order. Water, on the other hand, served as a means to cleanse Rome of this heinous act. The Romans also had a unique punishment for those who committed sacrilege or violated the sanctity of the Vestal Virgins, priestesses of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. The guilty party was buried alive within the city limits. This was because Roman law prohibited both the spilling of blood and the execution of individuals within the sacred boundaries of the city. Therefore, burying the guilty alive was a workaround that allowed the Romans to inflict severe punishment while still adhering to their religious laws. The condemned was placed in an underground chamber with a meager supply of food and water, symbolically delaying but not preventing their death. The Romans, in their creativity, also devised a punishment for those who committed treason. This was known as decimation. However, it was not the traitor alone who suffered. Instead, a group of individuals, usually a military unit or a cohort suspected of treason, was punished collectively. The group was divided into sets of 10. Each set would draw lots, and the individual who drew the shortest straw would be beaten or stoned to death by the other 9. This punishment was intended to foster unity and loyalty among soldiers, as the fate of one could easily become the fate of all. These examples of ancient Roman punishment methods illustrate a society that was both brutal and deeply symbolic. Punishment was not merely about retribution or deterring crime, it was about maintaining societal order and demonstrating power. Whether through the savage spectacle of the amphitheater or the symbolic rituals of the pour cool and live burial, the Romans transformed punishment into a public spectacle, a theater of power and control. As we continue our exploration of the dark and often perplexing world of ancient Roman punishments, remember that this was a society where absolute power reigned supreme. The state wielded this power with an iron fist, using punishment as a tool to maintain control, instill fear, and convey messages about societal order and norms. Through these punishments, the Romans created a theater of power that was both brutal and captivating. As we venture into the next section, we delve deeper into this unique and often disturbing world, shedding light on the practices that have both fascinated and horrified us for centuries. In this section, we will explore the lesser-known aspects of Roman justice, examining a range of punishments that may seem outlandish to our modern sensibilities, yet were integral to the Roman legal system. As we navigate the intricate corridors of ancient Roman criminal justice, let the complex intricacies and peculiar customs lull you into a state of tranquility and relaxation. Let's begin by exploring the punishment of damnatio ad beates. This term, translating to damnation to beasts, refers to a form of capital punishment where the condemned were executed by wild animals. This was typically carried out in a public spectacle, often as part of the gladiatorial games. To the Romans, this punishment was reserved for those they deemed enemies of the state, including prisoners of war, convicted criminals, and early Christians who were perceived as a threat to the traditional Roman religious order. The spectacle served not only as a means of execution, but also as a demonstration of Roman might and authority, a warning to those who might oppose them. Next, we encounter the silqua column incidere. This method involved using a sharp instrument, such as a knife or a razor, to make a cut or incision in the neck of the convicted person. This punishment was reserved for those convicted of high treason against the Roman state. It was considered a dishonorable death, and its purpose was to send a stern warning to others who might consider betraying the empire. The third punishment we will examine is the peine cool. This was a particularly gruesome form of execution reserved for those convicted of parricide, the act of killing one's father. The condemned was sewn into a leather sack with various animals, including a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. The sack was then sealed and thrown into a body of water. The symbolism of this punishment was potent, as the animals represented different aspects of treachery and deceit, and the act of submerging the sack was seen as a way of purging the crime from society. A less lethal but still unpleasant punishment was the act of fuarium. This was a form of corporal punishment used by the Roman military to discipline soldiers who had committed serious offenses such as desertion or theft. The convicted soldier would be beaten by his fellow soldiers with wooden sticks or fusties until he was either dead or incapacitated. The harshness of this punishment served as a deterrent to other soldiers, upholding discipline within the ranks of the Roman army. Lastly, we have the punishment of decimation. This was a form of military discipline used to punish mutiny or desertion within a legion. 1 in every 10 men was chosen by lot and executed, often by their own comrades. The remaining soldiers were then forced to live outside the military camp and subsist on barley instead of the usual wheat rations. The fear of this harsh punishment helped maintain order and discipline within the legions. These punishments, while brutal and harsh by our modern standards, were considered necessary to maintain order and discipline in ancient Roman society. They served as a deterrent, warning offenders of the severe consequences they would face for their crimes. It's important to remember that the concept of justice and punishment has evolved significantly over the centuries. What may seem cruel or excessive to us was considered the norm in ancient Roman times. As we traverse through the annals of Roman history, let the soft whisper of ancient tales lull you into a tranquil slumber. Leaving behind the hustle and bustle of modern life, let us surrender to the gentle embrace of a bygone era. As we journey further into the past, we find ourselves immersed in a world that, while vastly different from our own, was a civilization that laid the foundation for many of the ideas and institutions we have today. Let the echoes of ancient Rome guide you into a peaceful and restful sleep. As we delve into the annals of ancient Rome, let us explore some of the most peculiar punishments their society devised. Rome, a civilization that thrived on order and structure, had a multitude of penalties in place to deal with those who disrupted the peace. One such unusual punishment was for the crime of parricide, the act of killing one's own parents or close relatives. This heinous crime carried a truly horrifying penalty known as peine claire. The convicted would be sewn into a sack with a collection of animals, typically a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey. They would then be thrown into the Tiber River, where they would meet their watery end. This symbolic punishment served as a stark reminder of the gravity of the crime. Each animal represented a different aspect of the offense. The dog symbolized loyalty and fidelity, standing in stark contrast to the actions of the person being punished. The rooster's loud crowing represented the outcry caused by the crime. The snake embodied the secretive and deceitful nature of the act, while the monkey, often seen as a mimic of humans, reflected the monstrous and unnatural nature of the crime. The sack, water, and animals all combined to create a punishment that was a spectacle, a deterrent, and a testament to the Romans' creativity in meting out justice. However, the Romans didn't limit their punishments to humans. They also had a bizarre punishment for oxen and other animals that killed humans. The offending animal would be prosecuted just as a human would be, and if found guilty, it would be sentenced to exile or death. In certain instances, animals were even compelled to wear clothing and be paraded through the streets before their execution. This practice was based on the belief that animals possessed sentience, capable of comprehending and adhering to Roman law. Adultery was another crime that the Romans took extremely seriously, and the punishments for it could be quite severe. During the reign of Augustus, the Lex Julia was enacted, which granted the father of a woman caught in the act of adultery the authority to kill both his daughter and her lover without fear of prosecution. Additionally, a husband who discovered his wife in the act was permitted to kill her lover, provided he held a lower social status. If the husband chose not to kill the lover, he was required to divorce his wife within 3 days. Failure to do so could result in charges of pimping. Another peculiar punishment was reserved for Vestal virgins who violated their sacred vow of chastity. As priestesses of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, these women were sworn to celibacy for a period of 30 years. Breaching this vow was perceived as a betrayal of the city itself and was met with the punishment of burying the offending priestess alive. This was due to the belief that the shedding of a Vestal's blood would bring about dire misfortune. Among the more unusual punishments was the damnatio ad bestias, meaning condemnation to beasts. This was a form of capital punishment where the condemned were killed by wild animals, typically in an arena for public entertainment. This punishment was usually reserved for slaves, criminals, and Christians who were regarded as enemies of the state. Treason or mestas was considered the most heinous crime in ancient Rome, and it was met with the most severe consequences. The convicted traitor's property was confiscated, their memory was condemned, and their family was prohibited from mourning them. This was known as damnatio memorialia, the condemnation of memory, which served to erase the traitor from history. The Romans had a unique punishment for perjury or lying under oath. The accused would be thrown down from the Tarpeian Rock, a steep cliff on the southern side of the Capitoline Hill. This literal form of execution served as a stark reminder of the consequences of dishonesty. Tax evasion was also a serious offense in ancient Rome. Tax collectors caught cheating could be sentenced to work in the mines, which was essentially a death sentence due to the harsh conditions. The Romans had a vivid imagination when it came to punishments. They used a variety of methods, including being thrown into a river in a sack with animals, being buried alive, and being thrown off a cliff. These punishments served not only as deterrents, but also as a demonstration of Roman power and creativity. Justice in the Roman Empire was a concept that held a different meaning than today. The Roman justice system was founded on the principle of partilius, which translated to the father of the family. The part of familias held absolute authority over his family and could punish members of his household with a range of punishments, from flogging to disownment to execution. The Romans were also known for their use of corporal punishment. Flogging was one of the most common forms, often used for slaves and sometimes for free men. Flogging was typically carried out with a whip known as a flelum, which was often embedded with pieces of metal or bone to increase the severity of the punishment. Crucifixion, perhaps one of the most distinctive and brutal punishments in ancient Rome, was typically reserved for slaves, rebels, and the most heinous criminals. This method was not only designed to inflict a prolonged and torturous death, but also to serve as a public spectacle. The condemned individual would be nailed or tied to a large wooden cross and left to perish over several days. The body might even be left on the cross as a warning to others, emphasizing the severity of Roman law and order. However, the Romans also employed more creative forms of punishment. The poet Juvenal describes a punishment known as pool, where a criminal was sewn into a sack with various animals, including a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster, before being thrown into the river. This punishment was reserved for parasites, specifically those who killed their parents or other close relatives. Another unique punishment was the forced conversion into a gladiator. Gladiators were often slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war. While this profession could potentially lead to fame and fortune, it was inherently dangerous and often resulted in an early death. Ancient Rome was also known for its use of exile as a punishment. Exile could take two forms. The first, aqua ad ignis interdictio, translated as interdiction of water and fire, involved a temporary banishment where the individual was prohibited from being within a certain distance of Rome. The second form, relegatio in insulam, was a permanent banishment to a specific location, usually an island. Public humiliation was another form of punishment employed by the Romans. This could involve parading the criminal around the city, displaying them in the stocks, or forcing them to wear a toga pulla, a dark-colored toga that signified disgrace. Even the gods and goddesses were not immune to punishment in the world of Roman law. The punishment of deities, known as deorum injuriae, involved the destruction or desecration of a god or goddess's statue or temple. This punishment was employed when the Romans believed a deity had failed to safeguard the city or the emperor. As evident, ancient Roman punishment was a complex and multifaceted system. It was a society where family authority, corporal punishment, public humiliation, and even divine retribution held significant sway. It was harsh, brutal, and at times bizarre. However, it was a system shaped by its society and values, reflecting the strength and severity of the Roman Empire. As you drift into sleep, contemplate how our perceptions of justice and punishment have evolved over time. Delving deeper into the world of ancient Roman legal systems and their penalties, we encounter a particularly bizarre punishment known as peina coel. This punishment was reserved for those who committed parricide, the act of killing one's own parent or close relative. The Romans regarded this act as one of the most heinous crimes, disrupting the family unit and the societal structure as a whole. Consequently, peina was designed to be as degrading and terrifying as possible to deter any potential perpetrators. Peina, translated from Latin, literally means punishment of the sack. The condemned would be sewn into a leather sack, often accompanied by an assortment of live animals. These animals typically included a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey, each representing a different aspect of the crime. The dog symbolized the domestic nature of the act, the rooster highlighted its occurrence in daylight, the snake represented cunning and betrayal, and the monkey, a close relative to humans, symbolized the act of killing a family member. Once sewn into this ghastly bag, the convicted person would be thrown into a body of water, usually a river or the sea. This was not merely a form of execution, but a symbolic gesture. The Romans believed that drowning the perpetrator would symbolically return them to the womb of Mother Earth, erasing their existence and the heinous act they had committed. The first recorded instance of peina dates back to the 3rd century BC during the Roman Republic era. However, it fell out of use during the later years of the Roman Empire until it was revived again in the 9th century AD by Charlemagne, the king of the Franks. Charlemagne was greatly influenced by Roman law and incorporated many of its principles and penalties into his own legal system. While peina coel was indeed a severe and terrifying punishment, it was rarely used. The Romans understood the significance of family and the potential impact of such a crime on societal stability. Therefore, the mere existence of such a punishment served as a deterrent to those who might consider committing such an act. In stark contrast to peina, we find another unique punishment in ancient Rome, specifically designed for tax evaders. In a society where tax collection was crucial for the maintenance of the vast Roman Empire, it's not surprising that tax evasion was considered a serious crime. However, the punishment for this offense was not as severe as one might expect. Instead of being subjected to physical torture or death, tax evaders were made to sit on a special chair known as the celestium in the public square. This was not just any chair, it was a chair made of rough, unfinished wood designed to be uncomfortable. The evader was made to sit on this chair for a full day, exposed to the elements and the ridicule of passers-by. This punishment was more about shame and public humiliation than physical pain. It served as a powerful deterrent, constantly reminding the public of the consequences of evading taxes. The celestium symbolized societal order and compliance, demonstrating the importance the Romans placed on the community's financial contribution to the empire. As we explore the annals of ancient Roman punishments, we witness a society that placed immense value on societal order and justice. From the terrifying peña to the humiliating celestium, these punishments were meticulously designed to maintain order and uphold societal norms and values. While these punishments may appear bizarre and harsh to us today, they offer a captivating glimpse into the mindset and values of one of history's most influential civilizations. As you close your eyes and prepare for a peaceful slumber, imagine the vibrant streets of ancient Rome. Hear the lively chatter of the marketplace, the rhythmic clatter of chariots on cobblestone streets, and the distant murmur of the Senate in session. Feel the warm embrace of the sun on your face, savor the enticing aroma of freshly baked bread, and behold the grandeur of the Colosseum in the distance. As you immerse yourself in this imagined scene, let your mind wander and your body relax. Allow the stories of ancient Rome to lull you into a serene sleep, filled with dreams of history and mystery. Rest well and sleep soundly. As we delve deeper into the peculiarities of ancient Roman punishments, it is crucial to remember that much of our knowledge is derived from historical documents, which are often influenced by the perspectives and biases of their authors. Therefore, we must approach these accounts with a critical eye and recognize that the reality may have been different or even more extraordinary than what is conveyed in the written word. One such punishment was the pinnacle, or penalty of the sack, a gruesome execution method reserved for those who committed parricide, the heinous act of killing one's father. In Roman society, the father held a sacred position within the family structure, making this crime one of the most abhorrent offenses. The condemned individual was meticulously sewn into a leather sack, which was then filled with a variety of animals, including a dog, a snake, a monkey, and a rooster. They were subsequently thrown into a body of water, left to the mercy of the currents, and the panicked creatures trapped within the sack alongside them. The Romans employed a variety of punishments, with the primary objective of executing criminals and erasing their existence from history, leaving no trace of their crimes. Another peculiar punishment was the damnatio ad bestas, or condemnation to beasts. This form of execution was frequently used against slaves, criminals, and enemies of the state. It was a spectacle often held in amphitheaters, where the condemned were left defenseless against wild beasts. The Romans believed that being devoured by animals would deny the criminal an afterlife. This spectacle also served as entertainment for the masses, showcasing the might and power of the Roman Empire. Decimation was another form of punishment used by the Romans. This method was employed within the Roman army to punish units or large groups guilty of severe crimes such as mutiny or desertion. The word decimation originates from decimatio, meaning the removal of a tenth. The guilty soldiers were divided into groups of 10. Each group would draw lots, and the soldier who drew the shortest lot would be beaten or stoned to death by the other 9. This brutal practice was intended to instill fear and maintain discipline within the ranks. The Romans also had a unique punishment for Vestal virgins who violated their vows of chastity. Vestal virgins were priestesses of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, and were expected to maintain their purity for 30 years. If they broke this vow, they were condemned to death, but not by conventional means. Since the Romans believed it was sacrilege to spill a Vestal's blood, these women were buried alive. They were entombed in an underground chamber with a small amount of food and water, symbolically absolving the Romans of their direct killing. One of the most bizarre punishments reserved for those who committed sacrilege or blasphemy was the sacrilegious burial, The Romans believed in maintaining pax deorum, or peace of the gods, a state of harmony between Rome and the divine. Violating this harmony was considered a grave offense. The Torribolium, a peculiar Roman ritual, involved placing the guilty in a pit and having a bull slaughtered above them. The person was drenched in the bull's blood, believed to purify them of their sins. The Romans also practiced furium, a punishment for soldiers who fell asleep on their watch. The guilty soldier was brutally beaten to death with a club or stick by his fellow soldiers, serving as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and the severe consequences of neglecting one's duty. These bizarre punishments, though seemingly strange to us, served a specific purpose in Roman society. They were not only designed to punish the guilty, but also to deter others from committing similar crimes. They were integral to the Romans' broader system of maintaining law and order and reflected their values, beliefs, and norms. As we explore the peculiarities of ancient Roman punishments, we are reminded of the vast gulf that separates us from them, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of understanding and perception. What may appear bizarre or cruel to us was commonplace and accepted in their society. This stark contrast highlights the complexity and diversity of human civilizations and their evolution over time. In our next section, we will delve deeper into the motivations behind these punishments and explore how they were perceived by the Romans themselves. As we journey further into the past, let the soothing cadence of history lull you into a peaceful slumber as we unravel the mysteries of a civilization long gone. As we delve deeper into our exploration of Roman history, we discover that the ancient Romans' creativity in administering punishment extended beyond their own citizens. They also devised particularly brutal methods of retribution for captured enemy leaders and rebellious slaves. In these instances, we witness the full extent of the Roman penchant for spectacle and deterrence. One notorious example is the punishment of the defeated leaders of the Gauls, a Celtic people who frequently clashed with the expanding Roman Empire. Following the Gallic Wars, Julius Caesar famously captured the Gaulish chieftain Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix endured 5 grueling years of captivity before being paraded through Rome during Caesar's triumphal procession. The grand finale of this spectacle was his execution by strangulation in Rome's most infamous prison, the Tullianum. This demonstration of absolute power and dominance over a vanquished enemy was meticulously designed to instill fear and respect in Rome's potential adversaries. Another brutal punishment employed by the Romans was the crucifixion of slaves. This was a relatively common method of execution for slaves found guilty of serious crimes such as rebellion or murder. The crucifixion process was not only excruciatingly painful, but also intended to be a slow and humiliating demise. Victims were stripped naked and nailed or tied to a wooden cross or pole, left to hang in the open for days until they succumbed to their injuries, exposure, or dehydration. The bodies were often left on display after death, as a stark reminder to other slaves of the consequences of disobedience. This fate befell Spartacus and his followers after their failed slave revolt against the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC. It is crucial to recognize that the Romans lived in an era where such brutal methods were deemed essential to maintain order and control over their vast and diverse empire. As we delve deeper into the various punishments from ancient Rome, it becomes evident that these were not mere arbitrary acts of cruelty, but rather deeply ingrained in the Romans' understanding of justice, power, and order. In contrast to the brutal punishments meted out to enemies and slaves, it's intriguing to observe that the Romans also had a distinctive approach to punishing their own citizens. One such punishment was infamia, a form of social ostracism that stripped a Roman citizen of their rights and privileges. This punishment was often imposed on individuals who engaged in behavior deemed disgraceful or detrimental to the Roman moral fabric, such as prostitution, adultery, or even performing on the stage, which was considered a lowly profession. While infamia didn't involve physical harm, the damage to their reputation and social standing was often a severe blow. As we delve into the intricate tapestry of Roman history, it becomes evident that the Romans employed a multifaceted approach to punishment, ranging from brutal physical methods to subtle psychological ones. This reflects a society that was constantly evolving and adapting to its own needs and challenges. As we drift off to sleep, let's take a moment to appreciate the complexities of this ancient civilization and the valuable lessons it can still impart about power, order, and justice. As we continue our historical journey, let's return to the thriving heart of the ancient world, Rome. In this section, we'll explore one of the most peculiar and severe punishments imposed by the Romans, the infamous panaculi. This Latin term translates to the punishment of the sack, and was a capital punishment specifically designed for one of the gravest crimes in Roman society, parricide. The act of a child killing their parent was considered an act of absolute rebellion against the natural order, a crime so unthinkable that the punishment had to match its perceived severity. The peine claire was a rather elaborate form of execution that involved a complex series of events. The condemned was not merely put to death, the manner of their execution served as a symbolic representation of their crime. The guilty party was first subjected to a brutal beating with a rod of visanguines, or blood-colored rods. This was followed by a rather theatrical process involving several animals and a sack. The condemned was sewn into the leather sack along with a viper, a dog, a rooster, and a monkey. These animals were believed to symbolize the mockery of the human form and its various vices. The dog, often a symbol of loyalty and obedience, served as a stark reminder of the betrayal committed by the guilty party. The inclusion of a viper, a creature associated with deceit and treachery, embodied the traitorous act. The rooster, a creature that heralds the dawn, symbolized the awakening to the abhorrent crime. Meanwhile, the monkey, often a symbol of mischief, represented the chaos and disorder caused by the crime. Once all the creatures were sewn into the sack, it was sealed and thrown into the nearest body of water, usually a river or the sea. This symbolic act aimed to erase the individual from society as if they had never existed. Their disappearance into the water was a final farewell, a chilling reminder to all who witnessed it of the power and severity of Roman law. While undoubtedly cruel, this bizarre punishment reflected Roman attitudes towards crime and punishment. It was not merely about retribution or deterrence, but also about making an example of the offender. The spectacle of the panacle served as a stark reminder of the consequences of crossing the moral and legal boundaries set by society. However, despite its infamy, the panacle was not a commonly used form of punishment. In fact, it was reserved for the most heinous of crimes and considered an extreme measure even by Roman standards. Its rarity, coupled with its bizarre and brutal nature, has made it one of the most memorable and discussed punishments from ancient Rome. The poacule provides a fascinating glimpse into the mindset of the Romans. It demonstrates their belief in the symbolic nature of punishment and their unwavering commitment to maintaining societal order at all costs. It serves as a testament to their belief in the inherent sanctity of family relations and the extreme lengths they were willing to go to protect these bonds. As we conclude this section, let's take a moment to appreciate the ancient Romans' complexity, their unique perspective on justice, and their profound impact on shaping their society. It's a stark reminder that while we may find their punishments bizarre and cruel from our modern perspective, they were a product of their time and culture. A culture that was intricate, diverse, and full of contradictions, much like the civilizations that followed in its footsteps. In the next section, we will continue our exploration of ancient Rome's legal system and delve into the world of Roman trials, courts, and their intriguing approach to litigation. But for now, let the echoes of the past lull you to sleep, transporting you on a journey through time and space to a Rome that was, in many ways, not so different from our world today. Good night, dear listener, and sweet dreams. Reaching back into the annals of history, we embark on a captivating yet often brutal journey into the world of ancient Rome, a civilization renowned for its significant contributions to law, politics, engineering, and art. Rome was also infamous for its harsh and unusual punishments. For the Romans, laws were not merely a system of rules to be followed, but a powerful tool of social control, instilling fear and obedience among its citizens. As we delve deeper into this topic, let your imagination wander across the centuries, envisioning the grandeur and severity of Rome, its magnificent marble temples and bustling marketplaces, its senators and citizens, all under the watchful gaze of the law. An important aspect of the Roman legal system was the concept of poena. from which the English word penalty is derived. This was not merely a punishment, but a means of retribution, a way to restore balance to a society disrupted by a criminal act. For minor offenses, penalties could be straightforward, such as fines or public humiliation. However, for more severe crimes, punishments could be remarkably severe and sometimes even surreal. One such punishment was damnatio ad bestias, or condemnation to beasts. This was a form of capital punishment where individuals, usually slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war, were thrown into an arena to face wild animals, often lions, leopards, or bears. The condemned had little chance of survival and were left at the mercy of the beast, providing a morbid spectacle for the Roman populace. It's important to remember that for the Romans, this was considered entertainment, an integral part of their culture. Decimation was another punishment reserved primarily for soldiers guilty of serious offenses like mutiny or desertion. The word decimation comes from Latin, meaning removal of a tenth. The cohort or legion guilty of the offense would be divided into groups of 10. Each group would draw lots, and the unlucky soldier who drew the short straw would be clubbed or stoned to death by his comrades. This brutal form of discipline served not just as punishment, but also as a stark warning to other soldiers. Parricide was the act of killing one's parent or close relative. The Romans devised a particularly symbolic punishment for this offense. The guilty party would be sewn into a sack with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and an ape, representing the natural world's condemnation of their act. They were then thrown into the river, ensuring a slow and terrifying death. This was known as pole, or punishment of the sack. Another unusual punishment was the furium. This was a penalty for soldiers who fell asleep on the job or stole from their comrades. The guilty soldier would be beaten to death with a cudgel or a club, often by their fellow soldiers. This severe punishment served as a stark reminder of the demands of military life in ancient Rome. The Romans also had a unique punishment for Vestal virgins who violated their vow of chastity. As priestesses of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, they were expected to remain celibate for 30 years. If they broke this vow, they were buried alive, as the Romans believed it was sacrilegious to shed a Vestal's blood. A small chamber was prepared with a bed, a lamp, and some food, and then it was sealed, leaving the guilty person to their fate. Moving away from capital punishments, the Romans also used more ordinary forms of public humiliation. For example, a tax evader would be strapped to a cart and paraded around the city, subjected to the mockery and ridicule of the citizens. The purpose was to deter others from committing the same offense. Lastly, for those found guilty of treason, there was the punishment of aqua epinis, which involved water and bread. The offender would be kept in confinement, surviving only on bread and water until they wasted away. This slow and agonizing death was meant to symbolize the offender's betrayal to the state. By examining Roman punishments, we can see a combination of harsh retribution, public spectacle, and symbolic reparation. These punishments, as brutal as they were, reveal a society deeply rooted in tradition and ritual, where the law was more than just a system of governance. It was a fundamental fabric that held Roman society together. As we move away from this dark chapter of Roman history, we draw closer to our own world of dreams, leaving behind the echoes of a time when justice was swift and often brutal. As we continue our exploration of the most bizarre punishments from ancient Rome, we now turn our attention to a lesser-known but equally intriguing form of retribution, the pena cul. This peculiar punitive measure was reserved for those who committed one of the most heinous crimes in Roman society, parricide. The act of killing one's own parent, poena, or the penalty of the sack, was a punishment as symbolic as it was gruesome. The convicted individual was sewn into a leather sack, along with various animals, typically a viper, a dog, a rooster, and a monkey. This gruesome punishment was then thrown into a body of water, often the Tiber River. The Romans believed that this would not only punish the criminal, but also cleanse society of the heinous crime by dissolving it in the sacred river. The choice of animals held significant meaning. Each represented a specific vice that the Romans believed had contributed to the crime of parricide. The loyal dog symbolized betrayal, the mischievous and deceitful monkey represented treachery, The innocent rooster symbolized the loss of innocence, and the universal symbol of evil, the snake, represented the ultimate wickedness of the act itself. It's important to note that the Romans viewed this punishment as more than just physical torment. It was also a form of psychological torture. The condemned was not merely executed but cast out from society, both literally and metaphorically. They were confined in the darkness of a sack, surrounded by creatures that represented their sin, and then submerged into the depths of a river, cut off from the world of the living. This powerful symbolic gesture served as a message to the living about the gravity of the crime and the fate that awaited those who dared to commit it. Despite its seemingly straightforward nature, the application of this punishment was not always straightforward. There are records of instances when the execution was postponed due to a lack of one or more of the animals required. In such cases, the condemned person was kept in prison until the necessary creatures could be procured. These delays could prolong the mental agony of the condemned, making the punishment even more severe. Another fascinating aspect of this punishment lies in the very nature of the sack used. Oxhide, a material renowned for its strength and durability, was the primary material used to make the sack. This sack was designed to be robust enough to contain the struggling animals and the convicted person, as well as withstand the force of the river. The choice of oxhide held symbolic significance, as oxen were highly revered in Roman culture, often associated with strength, diligence, and sacrifice. While not as widely known as other Roman punishments, the poena offered a fascinating glimpse into the ancient Roman legal system and societal values. It was a punishment that combined physical torment with psychological distress, serving not only as a means of retribution, but also as a powerful deterrent. Although it may appear barbaric and bizarre to us, for the Romans, it was a fitting response to a crime they considered the ultimate betrayal. It served as a stark reminder of the severe consequences that awaited those who dared to violate the sacred bonds of family, highlighting the Romans' complex understanding of crime, punishment, and social responsibility. As we delve deeper into the most bizarre punishments from ancient Rome, it becomes evident that these were not merely acts of retribution, but carefully crafted messages to society. They were designed to maintain social order and deter potential criminals, reflecting the Romans' intricate comprehension of crime, punishment, and social responsibility. As we drift gently into slumber, let's ponder the intriguing complexities of Roman justice, where symbolism and reality intertwined in the most unexpected ways. The sun rises over the bustling city of Rome, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets and the grand marble structures. As we continue our exploration of the most bizarre punishments from ancient Rome, we turn our attention to the more psychological forms of punishment employed by the Romans. One such punishment was the infamous puercule or sack in Latin. The Romans had a particular abhorrence for parricide, the act of killing one's own parents or close relatives. They regarded it as one of the most heinous offenses a citizen could commit. The punishment for it was as unique as it was terrifying. The convicted individual would be confined within a leather sack, accompanied by an assortment of live animals. Typically, these animals included a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, chosen for their symbolic significance in Roman culture. The sack was then sealed and thrown into the Tiber River or the sea. This punishment was not merely intended to end the life of the sinner, but also to obliterate their existence from the collective memory of society. The Romans believed that water served as a barrier between the living and the dead. By submerging the guilty party in water, they effectively severed their ties with the world and banished them to an aquatic underworld. This punishment was not swift. The accused would be left to the mercy of the elements and the animals within the sack, making it a punishment as much psychological as it was physical. Another peculiar punishment was that of damnio ad bestas, or damnation to beasts. This was a form of capital punishment, where the condemned were thrown into a pit or arena with wild animals. These animals, starved and enraged, would most likely kill the condemned. This punishment was often reserved for slaves, criminals, and early Christians, and was a popular spectacle at the Roman games. The Romans viewed it as a form of entertainment, a morbid fascination with the brutality of nature, and a symbol of the power and authority of the Roman Empire. It also served as a deterrent, demonstrating the consequences of those who dared to challenge the authority or disrupt the social order of Rome. The Romans also employed a punishment known as decimation, a term that has since evolved to mean the obliteration or destruction of a significant portion of something. In ancient Rome, decimation held a distinct meaning and served as a military discipline employed by commanders to punish units or large groups guilty of capital offenses like mutiny or desertion. The term decimation originates from Latin, signifying the removal of a tenth. Soldiers were divided into groups of 10, and each group drew lots. The soldier with the shortest straw faced execution by his 9 comrades, often through clubbing or stoning. The surviving soldiers were frequently compelled to reside outside the camp and were provided with barley instead of wheat for their rations. Decimation was regarded as a severe punishment, a last resort measure aimed at restoring discipline and order. While it was cruel and brutal, it proved remarkably effective. The fear of decimation ensured the loyalty and obedience of Roman soldiers, safeguarding their allegiance to their commander and the empire. As the sun sets over the city, casting an orange glow over its architectural marvels and winding streets, we are reminded of Rome's darker side, a side that resorted to punishment as a means to an end, a tool for maintaining control, and a spectacle to entertain the masses. As we embark on our journey, we will delve deeper into this intricate and captivating society, exploring the intricacies of its legal system and the methods employed to enforce its laws. As you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander through the streets of ancient Rome. Imagine the grandeur of the Colosseum, the bustling activity of the Forum, and the serene atmosphere of the Senate. Allow the narratives of the past to guide you into a peaceful slumber, carrying you away on the wings of history. Next, we will continue our exploration, delving into the lesser-known punishments, those that have been lost to time and exist only in fragments and whispers. We will venture deeper into the heart of Rome, uncovering its hidden corners and unraveling its forgotten history. So, rest now and prepare for the journey ahead. Good night, dear listener. Continuing our exploration of ancient Roman justice, we venture into the enigmatic realm of unusual punishments. Renowned for their intricate legal system, the Romans imposed a diverse range of penalties for various crimes, some of which were as bizarre as they were severe. In this segment, we delve into the specifics of a few particularly peculiar punishments and the crimes that warranted such retribution. One such punishment was the peine coulae, reserved for those who committed the heinous act of parricide, the murder of a parent, sibling, or close family member. The Romans regarded this crime as a grave affront to the natural order, a disruption of familial bonds that demanded a unique and severe penalty. The offender would be sealed in a sack, often accompanied by a variety of live animals, including snakes, dogs, monkeys, and roosters. The sack, containing the guilty party and the animals, would be thrown into a river, leaving both the human and the animals to their dreadful fate. The symbolism of this punishment was profound, reflecting the chaos introduced into the world by the criminal's heinous act. Another remarkable punishment in ancient Rome was the act of damnatio ad bestias, or condemnation to beasts. Typically reserved for slaves, enemies of the state, and early Christians during the persecutions, this penalty involved throwing the condemned to wild animals, usually in the arena as part of the public spectacle of gladiatorial games. This spectacle served a dual purpose. It provided public entertainment and served as a warning to those who might consider defying the Roman state. However, not all punishments were public or violent. One such punishment was the aquet ignis intu, or prohibition of water and fire. This form of outlay involved forbidding the accused from using fire and water within the city limits of Rome. Consequently, they were unable to cook, warm their homes, or even draw water from the city's wells or fountains. The penalty effectively compelled the guilty party to self-imposed exile, as living within the city under such conditions was virtually impossible. The Romans also had a punishment for bankruptcy known as edictus. If a debtor failed to pay their debts, they could be handed over to their creditor as a slave. The debtor would be bound in chains and kept in this state of servitude until the debt was repaid through their labor. This stark reminder of the importance of financial responsibility within Roman society, where wealth and status were closely intertwined, served as a powerful deterrent. The Romans also practiced decimation, a military punishment in which 1 in every 10 soldiers was executed. This was done by drawing lots and served as a form of discipline within the Roman army. The purpose was to instill fear and ensure obedience among the troops. The unfortunate soldiers who drew the short straw would be clubbed or stoned to death by their fellow soldiers, reinforcing the idea that the army functioned as a collective body and any disobedience or failure was a collective responsibility. While these punishments may seem brutal and strange to us today, they were an integral part of Roman society. They reflected the Romans' values, fears, and complex relationship with authority, order, and justice. Despite their severity, these punishments were not arbitrary. They were the outcome of a legal process, albeit one deeply influenced by the social, political, and cultural realities of the time. The accused had the right to a defense, and the verdict was decided by a judge or a jury. The Roman legal system, despite its flaws and cruelties, was a complex mechanism that reveals much about the society that created it. As we delve deeper into the annals of ancient Rome's history, we'll encounter more of these peculiarities. Each one contributes to the intricate tapestry of human experience, woven from threads of triumph, failure, justice, and cruelty. These reminders serve as a testament to the fact that history, even in its most bizarre moments, reflects the beliefs, fears, and dreams of its people. As we approach the end of this chapter, let the gentle rhythm of our exploration lull you into a state of relaxation. Allow your mind to wander through the corridors of the past, finding solace in the knowledge that history, in all its complexity, is an integral part of who we are, shaping our present and future in subtle ways. Drift further into the sweet embrace of sleep, carrying with you the stories and lessons of a time long past, yet ever present in the echoes of our modern world. As we prepare to embark on a deeper journey into history, remember that each moment of our past holds a purpose, a lesson, and a story to tell. With that, I bid you a peaceful journey into slumber, where the tales of yesteryears will blend seamlessly with your dreams, creating a symphony of knowledge and repose. Good night. In the grand tapestry of ancient Rome's history, we now turn our attention to a punishment reserved exclusively for the most severe of crimes, decimation. Derived from the Latin root decimus, meaning 10th, the mere utterance of this word sent shivers down the spines of Roman soldiers. It was a punishment specifically designed for them and primarily employed in cases of mutiny or desertion. Decimation was a collective punishment inflicted upon Roman legions or large groups of military men found guilty of capital offenses such as cowardice, insubordination, or mutiny. Decimation, a unique form of punishment, aimed not only to inflict pain, but also to instill fear and maintain discipline within the ranks of the Roman military. The process was straightforward, yet brutal. Condemned men were divided into groups of 10, and the soldier who drew the short straw faced a grim fate. He would be beaten or stoned to death by his 9 comrades. While undoubtedly harsh, decimation served its purpose effectively. It served as a stark reminder to all within the legion of the consequences of dereliction of duty. However, it's important to note that decimation was not a frequent punishment. It was considered a last resort, reserved only when the integrity of the entire Roman legion was at stake. The reasoning behind this was simple. The Roman military machine relied on a strict hierarchy and a disciplined force. Any disruption or insubordination within a legion threatened the very foundation of the Roman military system. Decimation, therefore, was a tool employed to restore order and discipline, sending a powerful message to all who dared to challenge the might of Rome. Despite its brutality, decimation was not universally accepted within the Roman leadership. Many military leaders and emperors viewed it as excessively severe and detrimental to the morale and effectiveness of the legions. By the 3rd century AD, the practice of decimation had largely fallen out of favor, replaced by alternative forms of military discipline. As we delve deeper into the punitive measures of ancient Rome, it's worth contrasting the collective punishment of decimation with the individual punishments we've explored earlier. This contrast reveals much about Roman society and its values. While individual transgressions were dealt with severely, it was understood that a person's actions were their own and didn't reflect upon their family or community. However, in the military context, where unity and discipline were paramount, the transgressions of a few were seen as a reflection on the whole, leading to collective punishment. The punishments of ancient Rome, as brutal and harsh as they may seem to us today, offer a fascinating glimpse into a society deeply pragmatic. They valued order, discipline, and respect for authority above all else. These punishments, from crucifixion to decimation, were not merely about retribution, they served a purpose. They acted as a deterrent, maintained social order, and asserted the power of the state. As we drift further into the night, let's ponder these aspects of a civilization long past. The moonlight casts long shadows, and the quiet darkness invites us to imagine a time of togas and centurions, of emperors and legions, of a vibrant society that has left an indelible mark on human history. As your eyelids grow heavy and the whispers of the past become softer, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful slumber. When dawn comes, we'll continue our exploration of ancient Rome and its captivating history. But for now, let the echoes of the past lull you into a calm and restful sleep. Good night. Ancient Rome, a civilization that spanned over 1,000 years, was a beacon for architecture, government, warfare, and societal systems. It also held a certain notoriety for its unique and often bizarre punishments. The ancient Romans, known for their strict discipline and belief in the power of law and order, implemented harsh laws and punishments that were often brutal and strange to our modern sensibilities. In this section, we'll explore some of the most unusual punishments used by the Romans to maintain discipline and societal control. One of the most bizarre punishments employed by the Romans was known as damnatio ad bestias, or condemnation to beasts. This form of execution was a prominent feature of the Roman games, a cruel spectacle that showcased the severity of the consequences of disobedience. Criminals, especially those who had committed crimes against the state, were often thrown unarmed and defenseless into arenas to face wild beasts like lions, tigers, bears, or other large, dangerous animals. These unfortunate individuals would be mauled to death, serving as a stark reminder to the citizens of Rome of the consequences of their actions. Another peculiar punishment was peina, or the punishment of the sack. This punishment was reserved for those who committed the crime of parricide or the killing of a parent. The guilty party would be sewn into a leather sack along with various animals, including a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster. The sack would then be thrown into the Tiber River, leaving the condemned to drown in a horrifying and claustrophobic manner. Symbolically, the animals trapped in the sack represented the chaos and disorder caused by the crime. Lastly, there was the furium, a form of military discipline imposed on Roman soldiers found guilty of serious offenses such as desertion or theft. In this punishment, the guilty soldier would be beaten to death by his fellow soldiers using clubs or heavy sticks. This punishment, a brutal form of execution, served as a harsh lesson to other soldiers about the consequences of violating military code. Infamia, a slightly less violent but equally bizarre punishment, involved a significant loss of personal reputation and social standing. It was often imposed on those found guilty of moral turpitude like adultery or fraud. The effects of infamia were far-reaching, stripping the guilty party of civil rights, barring them from public office, and often shunning them from society. In a society that valued honor and public respect, the shame and social isolation were considered severe penalties. Lastly, there was decimation, a form of collective punishment used by the Romans, especially in the military. If a unit was found guilty of cowardice or disobedience, 1 in every 10 men would be selected by lot and executed by his fellow soldiers. The remaining 9 would live in disgrace, often denied regular rations and forced to camp outside the military encampment's protective walls. This brutal punishment instilled fear and maintained discipline within the Roman military ranks. While shocking to us, these punishments were integral to Roman society, reflecting their belief in the power of law and order and the harsh measures necessary to maintain it. Although they may seem cruel and unusual to us, they were not considered such in ancient Rome. Instead, they were seen as essential for the strength and stability of the Roman state.